I love debates. I watch them many times on YouTube where a Christian will debate an atheist, and I just love watching and learning. I love a good, civil, grace-filled exchange of ideas when both sides are striving to learn from one another. Something we don't see a whole lot of in today's culture. But with that in mind, I want to go on record to say that I would most likely pass if given an opportunity to debate Jesus. I'd pass. I probably wouldn't take him up on that offer. But that is not the case of the Samaritan woman in this video, in the 4th chapter of John's Gospel. And it is not the case of many of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and even disciples who throughout the New Testament took time to debate with Jesus. Our passage this morning shows this woman debating the essence of worship, where Jesus ends the debate rather quickly by saying this: "But the time is coming and is here when true worshipers will worship in spirit and truth. The Father looks for those who worship him this way. God is spirit." Don't miss that. God is spirit, and it is necessary to worship God in spirit and truth. The Samaritan woman debates with Jesus as to where the best place to worship, who's the best people to worship, and how to worship. And Jesus puts an end to that and says, right now, this is how one worships in spirit and in truth. I think we have forgotten in the Christian church what worship really is. Worship, as I understand it, is our very purpose in life. Let that sink in for a moment. Worship is the very purpose of our life. It is the very reason we were created. I want to answer the question this morning, well, when we worship, who gets what? How does it unfold? And I stand humbly before you this morning to share that I believe that worship is not meant to please us. That's not the sole purpose for worship, to fill our tent to get us through another week. The very essence of worship is to please God. What is most important regarding worship is not so much what we get from it, but rather what God receives because of it. But here's the good news. The good news is that when we worship completely, totally, in spirit and in truth, God and all of us receive abundantly. I'm going to refer to Romans 12 a few times this morning. First, the NIV translation says this: "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." Have we offered our bodies here this morning? Our body is what houses this very Spirit of God. It houses our minds and the way we think. It houses our attitude. It houses what we say and how we say it. It houses the very love of God within us. Have we offered it all to God? And I'll be up front with you. I don't think I told you, but this was the passage that was the impetus behind doing our offering a different way. where offering goes far beyond what you put in a plate that goes by you for 3.5 seconds. Worship is offering yourselves to God completely. Think of it this way. Theologically, in the church, we give God some really amazing titles. God is sovereign, transcendent, omnipotent, omniscient. In other words, He's everywhere and knows everything. But there is one thing God does not have. There's one thing God does not have. God does not have worship unless we offer it. It's the only thing God does not have unless we give it to God freely. So I want to take a few moments this morning and talk about what worship is and what it should be, what it could be, and what it ought to be. Because worship is about giving our 100% attention to God. See, worship takes energy. It's a verb. It's active. Worship is not a passive endeavor. I really believe that when we leave here and we worship for this 1 hour on Sunday morning, you ought to leave exhausted, tired, spent. Your brain ought to go bubbled up because you've thought and worshiped so hard and you're so attentive to God. Worship demands our focus on something other than ourselves, which goes against our human instincts of being self-absorbed, self-centered, a consumer of worship. You see, the truth is God is always focused on us. So the only true response from us is to always be focused on God. That is worship. Constant attention to God. Always focusing on God. Because life changes when focus changes. When we focus solely on ourselves, our wants, our needs, our desires. I don't know about your life, but when I do that, I begin to worry. I become insecure, fearful, discouraged. But when our focus is on God and God alone, we then bring into our life a peace and a power that changes us. That's true worship. Total attention on God. Which leads us then to our affection for God. And this goes hand in hand with attention. We give our attention to God so that we might share our affection for God. Now, you can have one without the other. If you're married, you can bring attention to your spouse. But is there affection? Is there affection? I hope and pray that one of the holiest moments of worship every Sunday at the 10:30 worship service, and it just happened, is what the children have been saying at the conclusion of every children's sermon for the last 6 years. That's a trivia question. What have our children been saying for the last 6 years after the children's sermon? God, I love you. God, I love you. Now that may be the only time you hear those words or say those words in any given week is out of the mouth of our children. But I believe that above ritual, above religion, above the wacky rules and regulations of a church, God seeks relationship first. God seeks our love, our hearts. So we need to ask ourselves this morning in this place, is this worship? Is my worship the truest expression of my love for God? Or is this merely a religious activity cloaked in performance, appearance, and duty? That's why Jesus said in Matthew, when someone asked, "Teacher, what's the greatest commandment?" he responded by saying, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." Have we done that here this morning? Do we do so in worship? To love our God with all our heart, soul, and mind. To worship God in spirit and in truth takes our attention. It takes our affection so that God can deploy our abilities in the world. This attention to love is our work, is our reason for being, that goes beyond our theologies and our attitudes. As a matter of fact, our work is worship. What you do tomorrow, 9 to 5, 8 to 8, whether you're working or you're retired, what you do tomorrow is worship. Worship does not just take place between 10:30 and 11:30 in a sanctuary. Worship does not end with an amen during private prayer or on Sunday morning with a benediction. The best worship happens at the workplace when your work becomes worship. I came across this quote I want to share with you. It said this, quote, "In life it is not what you do that matters, it's who you do it for." Let me repeat that. In life it's not what you do that matters, it's who you do it for. Back to Romans 12. I'll use the Message translation. I love it. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, and you're walking around life. And place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. That's worship. What we do here on Sunday morning is worship. What you do immediately going outside that door is worship. What you'll do tomorrow morning is worship. And if you get anything out of my babbling this morning, worship is a lifestyle. Worship is a lifestyle. It's not something you come to. It's something you become. Worship is a lifestyle in the here and now that prepares us for eternity. I get this question all the time, and maybe you do too. What's heaven like? The hereafter? Eternity? What's that all about? I respectfully and humbly ask you to consider that eternity is worship. Worship. It will be a time where our fullest attention, our deepest affection, and our abilities will love the very origin and essence of love, which is God. My hope is that this time of worship will lead us into an understanding that every breath you take this next week should be worship. Should be glorifying God. Every word we speak ought to be worship in spirit and in truth. And that we transform worship from an hour on Sunday morning to our lifestyle. And you thought you were just coming to church.